Welcome to Phantom of Murder, where this October we're diving into the spine-chilling world of serial killers. Day 3, Harold Shipman. Harold Shipman, also known as Dr. Death, was a British general practitioner and one of the most prolific serial killers in history. Shipman's ability to carry out many murders over decades, undetected by authorities, shocked the world and led to significant changes in medical practices and patient care oversight in the UK. Harold Frederick Shipman was born on January 14, 1946, in Nottingham, England. Harold Shipman had a very close and intense relationship with his mother, Vera. She was a dominant and influential figure in his life, often described as being controlling and instilling in Shipman a sense of superiority. His father, Harold Frederick Shipman, was a quiet figure in his life compared to the dominant presence of his mother. He a lorry driver and is often described as a quiet and reserved figure in the family. When Harold Shipman's mother was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer, he oversaw her care and became fascinated by the effects of morphine on her suffering until she died in 1963. Deeply affected by her death, Shipman resolved to pursue a career in medicine. Despite initially failing his entrance exams, he was admitted to Leeds University Medical School 2 years later, where he began his medical training. In 1966, when Shipman was 20 years old, he married Primrose Ox-Toby. They had 4 children together, a son and 3 daughters, and the family appeared to have a stable and typical domestic life. Shipman had a controlling nature, and he was known to be secretive about his personal life, so his dark side remained hidden from her and their children. So when he was caught, Primrose reportedly had a difficult time reconciling the man she loved with the crimes he committed, and she stood by him for a period after his arrest. Primrose's support diminished as the evidence against him mounted, and she ultimately distanced herself from him after his conviction. Harold Shipman's killing spree spanned from the 1970s until his arrest in 1998. Shipman was responsible for the deaths of at least 215 of his patients, though some estimates suggest the number could be much higher. His method typically involved administering lethal doses of painkillers, such as diamorphine, heroin, to elderly patients. He would use his medical knowledge to exploit the vulnerabilities of his patients, often killing them in their homes or in his office. The murder of Eva Lyons, March 1975. The case of Eva Lyons, Harold Shipman's first confirmed victim, is significant because it marked the beginning of his long killing spree. Eva Lyons was a 70-year-old woman who was killed by Shipman on March 21, 1975, the day before her birthday. At the time, Shipman was working as a general practitioner in Todmorden, West Yorkshire. Shipman administered a lethal dose of diamorphine, heroin, the same drug he would use on many of his later victims. Her death initially appeared natural due to her age and health condition, and Shipman was able to avoid suspicion. It wasn't until years later, when his crimes were fully uncovered, that Eva Lyons' death was recognized as part of his murder spree. The murder of Marie West, March 1995. Marie West, an 81-year-old woman, was murdered by Harold Shipman on March 6, 1995. As with many of his victims, Shipman administered a fatal dose of diamorphine during a routine visit to her home. He then falsified her medical records to make it appear that she had been in declining health, masking the true cause of her death. Marie West's body was one of the first to be exhumed when police began investigating Shipman in 1998. Toxicology tests confirmed that she had died from a diamorphine overdose, which directly implicated Shipman in her murder. Her case played a crucial role in his eventual conviction, as it provided clear forensic evidence linking him to the crime. The murder of Jean Lilly, April 1997. On the morning of her death on April 25, 1997, Mrs. Lilly was visited by Dr. Shipman. A neighbor grew increasingly worried about how long the doctor was with Mrs. Lilly, who was suffering from a cold. Shortly after Shipman left her home, the neighbor discovered Mrs. Lilly's body. An ambulance crew later confirmed that she had been dead for some time due to a fatal dose of morphine. Notably, Mrs. Lilly was the only one of Shipman's 15 victims who was married at the time of her death. Shipman called her husband on his mobile phone to inform him of her passing. The final murder, the murder of Kathleen Grundy, June 1998. Harold Shipman's last known victim was 81-year-old Kathleen Grundy, who died on June 24, 1998. As with many of his other victims, Shipman administered a lethal dose of diamorphine, which he disguised as routine medical care. After her death, Shipman attempted to forge her will, leaving her entire estate to himself, which raised suspicions and ultimately led to a police investigation. Kathleen Grundy's murder was key in exposing Shipman's long-running killing spree, as it provided both a motive, the forged will, and physical evidence, the presence of diamorphine in her exhumed body. Her case marked the end of Shipman's crimes and led to his arrest in September 1998. Harold Shipman's death, January 2004. After a thorough investigation prompted by the suspicious deaths of several of his patients, Shipman was arrested in September 1998. He was charged with multiple counts of murder and forged documents related to the deaths of his patients, including Kathleen Grundy, which raised alarms due to a fraudulent will naming him as the beneficiary. In 2000, Shipman was found guilty of 15 counts of murder and 1 count of forgery, receiving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Harold Shipman hanged himself in his cell at HM Prison Wakefield on January 13, 2004, just before his 58th birthday. Following his suicide, a post-mortem examination was conducted and an inquest was opened. Many families of his victims felt cheated, as Shipman's death meant they would never receive a confession or understand his motives. It was suggested that he may have taken his life to secure his wife's financial future after losing his NHS pension. Despite her initial protests of his innocence, evidence indicated that Primrose Shipman began to suspect his guilt. After remaining in Sheffield for over a year, Shipman's body was eventually cremated, attended only by his wife Primrose and their 4 children, marking a tragic and controversial end to the life of one of history's most notorious serial killers.